Hey, what's up guys, it's Jonathan and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Instead of comparing two flagship phones, we're going to be comparing the 2015 Moto G to the Galaxy S6. Now I know a lot of you guys probably think I'm crazy for doing this, but the Moto G is a damn good phone, and I'm going to show you why. Now when it comes down to the specs, the S6 just trumps the Moto G outright. There is no competition. The Moto G packs the Adreno 306 and the Snapdragon 410, and this particular model has 2 GB of RAM. The S6 packs the Exynos octa-core chipset with 3 GB of RAM, and it is a powerhouse of a phone. So with that being said, there's really no reason to run any type of benchmark test or anything like that, because we know the S6 is just going to blow the Moto G out of the water. So let's start with the build quality. The Moto G is made of plastic. There's really no premium design here, but you have the ability to customize it using Moto Maker to make it the way you want and how you want it the first time around. You don't need to throw a case on this phone because it's made of plastic and it's super rugged. Plus, if you damage the backplate, you can pop it off and get a swappable one in a different color for about 15 bucks. The S6 on the other hand is a very premium phone. It's made of Gorilla Glass 4 on the front and back with a metal trim to go around the sides. You won't find any metal on the Moto G except for the strip down the back with the dimple in the camera. But with the S6, that glass design that feels oh so premium makes it oh so fragile. And I proved this in a previous video. If you missed that video, make sure you check it out. This thing will break on almost any drop about waist height. Now with each of these designs comes a level of functionality. Take the Moto G for example. It is waterproof. Despite it saying water resistant on the website, this thing can survive for 30 minutes in 1.5 meters of water. But that depends if you align the backplate correctly. Make sure you take your time doing it, you won't have any issues. The Moto G also has a removable backplate, hence it being swappable, exposing the micro SD card slot expandable up to 32 GB. And you won't find this on the S6. Now the S6 packs a fingerprint scanner on the front, giving you some great security, and it also has a heart rate monitor and an O2 sat reader on the back, giving you some great health functionality. Now when it comes to the cameras on each of these phones, there's really no comparison to the S6. The S6 has a f1.8 aperture, 16 megapixel OIS camera, and it is one of the best cameras on a mobile phone to date. The Moto G does have a 13 megapixel camera. It's improved over the previous model. In fact, it's better than last year's Moto X, but it only has an aperture of f2.0, and it does have the same sensor as the Nexus 6. If you're familiar with that phone, it wasn't known for taking the best pictures, and that carries on with the Moto G. Sometimes it overexposes, and sometimes it underexposes. It all depends on whatever the camera wants to do. The software behind it needs some improvement, and the camera overall is just average. Now the same thing gets carried on to the front-facing cameras. They both pack 5 megapixel cameras, but the S6 has an aperture of f1.8, it has better image processing, and it also has a wide-angle lens, and it's beautiful. Now when it comes down to the displays of each phone, there is no match to the S6, and that goes for a lot of the flagship phones on the market to date. The S6 features a 5.1-inch Quad HD Super AMOLED display, and it is gorgeous. Has great color reproduction, blacks are dark and inky, and outdoor visibility is spot on because it shoots up to high nits. I never had an issue reading anything on my display in broad daylight with my S6. The Moto G display isn't bad. It features a 720p panel, comes in at 5 inches. It's an IPS panel, gives you some great viewing angles. Colors are not the best, and outdoor visibility is not the best. But it is average, and it does a great job at what it does. It does feature Gorilla Glass 3 on the front, where the display portion is, giving you some great protection. In terms of software, this is where things get a little hairy. The S6 of course runs Android 5.1.1, at least my T-Mobile variant here, and it also runs TouchWiz. And TouchWiz is the Galaxy lineup's downfall. TouchWiz has always been known to be very laggy, full of bloatware, and Samsung did a great job with the S6 at toning it down and giving you some more functionality, but it still lags. The Moto G on the other hand is running Android 5.1.1, but it's pretty much a stock version of Lollipop. It does have a few quirks in it that Motorola threw in there, but they're great functional quirks. For example, with the Moto G, you can simply twist your wrist and it will launch the camera. You can do a karate chop and it will turn on the flashlight or turn it off, and you have active display. So you just gotta pick up your phone and boom, there's your notifications. But the S6 also has a few quirks, minus all the ones that I don't really use. The multi-window feature is awesome. Same thing with the feature that allows you to shrink an app into a small window and then drag it around the screen. Gives you some great multitasking capabilities. To go along with that heart rate monitor on the back and the O2 sat reader, you have S Health, which is great for health fanatics. and you also have the ability to double tap the home button to quickly launch the camera. That is probably the most used feature to me. Now, the twist of the wrist gesture on the Moto G does not compare to how fast the camera will launch on the S6 with a simple double tap of the home button. So here's where things get interesting. Instead of running benchmark tests, I ran a real-world app opening test to see how well these two phones paired against each other. What I did was I made sure there were no apps running in the background, made sure both phones were connected to the same Wi-Fi network, and I also made sure all my notifications were cleared. Then I launched the clock app on both phones, ran the stopwatch, and then opened the series of apps that you see on the screen. I'm gonna hush for a minute and let the test go ahead and wrap itself up, so that way you see there was no falsifying or anything like that. Okay, so as you can see, the S6 still beat the Moto G, which is not surprising to me at all, but the difference is only by 50 seconds, and that's pretty damn good. But I also ran the test on my own, while I was sitting down and comfortable, because it can get kind of awkward holding the phones in front of a camera, and your fingers tend to slip sometimes, so on and so forth. When I ran the test on my own, there was only a difference of 30 seconds. That is incredible. The biggest downfall of the Moto G is the GPU. It struggled when it tried to open Mortal Kombat X. Even the S6 took a little bit of time, but it was much quicker. This is a very high frame rate game, and it has a lot of intense graphics, which is why the Moto G struggled. But needless to say, the Moto G held its own versus the S6, and it's phenomenal, especially given the price difference between these two phones. The Moto G, $200 if you get the 1 GB of RAM and the 8 GB of onboard storage. It's about $220 if you get the 2 GB of RAM and the 16 GB of onboard storage, which I highly suggest. The S6, you're looking at anywhere between $600 to $800 for a 32 or 64 GB version. The Moto G is a fraction of the cost, but yet performs almost as good when it comes to day-to-day tasks. If you're not a huge gamer and you just use your phone for browsing the web, texting, making phone calls, the Moto G will actually be better than the S6, despite the specs. Now, we all know from the first generation Moto X that specs don't mean everything, but I didn't expect a $200 phone to almost beat an $800 phone. It's phenomenal. Another area the Moto G is phenomenal is battery life. The Moto G has phenomenal standby time, not so much on the S6. The Moto G, I can pretty much get 5 hours of on-screen time at least. Now I know before all the comments start, it's a 720p panel and it has a smaller processor, but 5 hours minimal on the Moto G for $200 is amazing. The S6, you're looking at anywhere between 2.5 to 4 hours depending on your usage and what settings you have on, and that's pretty terrible for a flagship phone. So here's my thing. Don't let specs fool you. A phone can be a great phone with dated specs as long as it's running the right software. Personally, if it was me and I was up for an upgrade, I knew about the Moto G, but I was interested in the S6, I would go with the Moto G. Save some money, save your upgrade, $200 unlocked, great phone, may not have the best camera, it's gonna give you some great day-to-day performance and you won't be disappointed. The S6 is not a bad phone. And I'm not saying the Moto G is better than it, because we know the S6 is a much more powerful phone and much more capable phone. But for the price they're asking for this phone, you can pretty much get almost 4 of these. Well guys, I hope this video helped you and you learned something from it. If you did, drop me a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, follow me on all my social media connections. Of course, I'll talk to you in the next video. Peace.